We working? Trying to bring it up on my channel so I can read the comments. Let's see what we got. Doesn't seem to be showing up yet, but I'm going to assume there it is. There we are. How many people we got? We got one. Let me know if the audio and video is working. So welcome back to me. It's been a while. If you've seen my more recent video, not the last one, I think it was the one before the last or 2 videos ago, you know why I've been absent, and hopefully have everything fixed soon. Won't be an issue. But I did want to absolutely say thank you to everyone who's contributed, and definitely makes a big difference. Give me less to worry about, and there's been tons of stuff going on in the world to talk about. So I don't have a hugely specific agenda for tonight, and I once again gave pretty last minute notice to Dan and Chase, so they're probably not going to be joining me. Dan said he should definitely be free next week if I can still do it, but that is going to be like a couple days before my surgery, so I'm planning on doing one next week because I might not be able to for 2 weeks or so, but who knows? Schedule gets changed or whatever. Good to know it's coming through. And one more thing too is there is a shipping delay with some of the components for my survival fishing kit. So there's still some on Amazon; those are available. But the most recent, if you place a video on the website, there's one video order. If you place an order on ruledwasteland.com, it is going to be delayed. There was one order today that I have to email the guy for the deluxe. Yeah, I have pretty much as many of the micros as you want, but the multi-tool that comes in the deluxe fishing kits, shipping is delayed on those. Something happened at the port, so I don't know how much longer it's going to be, probably a week or 2, but you can still back order them if you want. I believe so on the website, but just keep in mind that will take probably 2 weeks. I want to be safe. I don't want to say a week because it might be a little bit more than that. But yeah, thanks again to everyone who contributed. Appreciate it. I won't say much more about that, but thanks a lot. So, hey, first, last, Chester, Mr. Landfill, good to see everybody. So if you guys always can, of course, throw in any comments that you want about what you want to talk about today, but yeah, other than being a little scraggly, I feel pretty good today. I haven't gotten cleaned up yet. I have a haircut scheduled for right before the surgery, so in case I'm not feeling up to it and my hair maintains its fabulous condition for a few weeks at least before I need to worry about it again. But yeah, no, that was the easy part. My back didn't blow out from that. That's easy money, Dark Knight. But yeah, it's crazy because I haven't been feeling up for making videos at sometimes, so there's been a lot going on that I haven't got to make a video about. I touched on the cyber attacks that happened out here in Vegas. If you haven't watched that video, that's really interesting. Not because, I mean, this thing has happened before. We've seen a lot of low-level bureaucratic agencies. They like to hit city and state-level infrastructural things with these these ransomware attacks because they pay out and they have to get them back up and running, but they're also probably poorly managed by a bunch of idiots and incompetence and everything. So the casino industry, you would expect them not to be nearly as incompetently run, but like I pointed out to someone in the comments, like it's not mob run anymore. These are just pretty much like any major corporation now. In fact, we've even had people get away with robbing the casino cages, just like a gunpoint run in, rob the cage and run out. That's happened a couple times in the past year or 2, probably 3 or 4 times. And I've only heard of them catching like half the guys. So it's really not the same as it was in terms of you being guaranteed to be hunted down by the mob if you messed with the casinos. So from what I've heard, these casinos like MGM and Caesar paid out anywhere from like 10 to 30 million. They actually paid $10 to $30 million ransoms to get control back of their system. So I don't know what they're doing after the fact, but it does show you how fragile that stuff is. And this is a very, when you're talking about big picture, one company is a very closed system, but even within that company, the fact that their electronic system controlled everything from the parking to the room check-in to the slot machines to the data on customers and probably employees, all some giant monolithic system that once it gets corrupted or accessed, everything was shut down. And you better believe it's the same in a lot of these other systems, whether that's the power generation, the communications infrastructure, like internet, cell phone towers. And if any one of those things go down, everything goes down to some extent. Like if you lose comms, How is emergency services? How effective are they going to be? I know they have some level of alternate system with radio and stuff, but if the power goes down, how many of those relays, how many of those towers, how many of the dispatches, all that stuff, how are they going to be able to refuel their vehicles? Are the hospitals going to be able to take the people that are injured, that even if the police can't find them and transport them? So it doesn't take much to really screw with the system. And as someone pointed out recently on Twitter, I think I mentioned this in my last video too, is we seeing stuff like this all the time that would be, if it had happened 5-10 years ago, would be the story for at least a day to a week. And now it's just gets gone. Like United having to shut down, I think it was United, might have been Southwest, but I think it was United having to shut down their entire ground, every flight in the US for hours, like 4 to 6 hours, because their system went down. That's huge. You know what I mean? Like that's enormously impactful on everything that goes on in the country, and barely made a blip. Same with this cyber attack. Like, yeah, you see it in the news, but barely made a blip in terms of the ongoing news schedule and what's really being pumped up. SCADA systems are pretty vulnerable to cyber attacks, power plants, water plants, et cetera. Yeah, and what they've been doing is they haven't necessarily been brute forcing these systems by like hacking them in the traditional sense. It's more technically like various kinds of phishing attempts where they get the information through by like tricking people. In the case with the casinos, from what I understand, they got publicly available information off LinkedIn enough to where they could impersonate an employee, called the IT desk, and were saying they were having trouble getting into their system, like it was messing up, and they had enough of this person's personal information through various publicly and maybe not so publicly available information that they were able to impersonate them to the extent that the IT gave them access. And then from there, it's just all it's all she wrote. But we're also seeing, that's the crazy thing, is we're seeing all this, and we're seeing, that's why I titled this video the way I did, because everything seems to be happening at once. So much of these fragilities are bubbling to the surface at the same time. And that's what's really dangerous, is if you could count on disruptions in one element of logistics or society, it might not be that bad. But when everything's kind of getting exposed and dilapidated and fragile at the same time, that's when it really has a potential for like major disruptions. And we're seeing that with infrastructural stuff. We're seeing that certainly with the economy. And the worst part about it is tyranny is being ratcheted up at the same time. And that's, to me, the most scary thing. I can stock food for a year, 2, 5 years if I wanted to. If I decided that's what I need to do, that's relatively trivial in the grand scheme of things. It just costs a few bucks. But to prepare for the government really coming after you, that's a lot more difficult, especially if you add in also having to deal with economic hardships. And that's what we see all over the world, unfortunately. And that's probably what we're going to see here to some extent, at least. Social engineering is a key hacking technique. Yeah, and with AI and stuff, you can even copy people's voices if you have some video. And everyone's on video. Like right now, there's hundreds of hours of me on video, and most people have social media with some stories or clips of them on vacation. And you don't need that many minutes of someone talking for these AI programs to be able to copy their voice enough to be convincing to get out a few sentences to call someone up over the phone and pretend to be them. And so even someone that knows them, it might work. So it's pretty wild. And with the economy, though, the interesting thing is we have seen a few of the kind of theses that preppers are always talking about come true, or at least be proven to be somewhat accurate over the past few weeks or months. And one of those is strength of commodities. Specifically, I know I've talked to you guys about uranium. I'm super salty about this, by the way, because it's another example of me being right and still not being able to necessarily benefit from it. But I've always talked about how uranium is a good choice for somewhere to, I'm not a financial advisor, but I always thought it was a good choice. And I had a decent chunk of uranium stocks that I had to sell just because I'm a brokey and I needed the money. It wasn't because I thought it was a good time to sell. I just knew I needed the money. And it was 2022. So it was kind of early on in 2022. Like I had like 10,000 shares of this company called Bannerman alone. Like 5 months after I sold it, it 15x'd. And everything else went up too. Luckily, I've had some other people that I know that were able to get in on this to some extent, but I'm so salty about that, guys. So salty. Because that was like, it wasn't a lot of that one stock, but it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,500 to $2,000 that 15x'd like 6 months after I sold it. So I would have had somewhere between 15 and like $25,000, something like that, $30,000. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that one hurts. But it's nice to be right, I guess. And I still expect this to continue. Like, this wasn't like a blip and then it's over. Like, we're going to see real things, real estate, food production, and agriculture, certainly commodities. Now, I do think that residential and commercial real estate will take a big dip, but in the long run, it is still a real thing. So especially agricultural real estate probably won't dip as much in the beginning, but I do expect, like I've always said, I think we're pretty close to seeing if I'm right about this, which is that we will see some sort of crash before we see the true melt up. So even though people like Michael Burry, the guy who the Big Short movie was basically based on, he has made a huge short positions for the market, which basically he's betting that the market will have a significant crash or decline within the next, I think before the end of the year, but certainly within the next 6 months for these puts to pay off. And but I do think that after that, to recover from that, the only way they can recover is to jump into money printing mode. So it's always been my thesis, because we're seeing, if you're talking about just economics, not the currency, but the economy, because they're two separate things. Obviously, they're interlinked, but they're two separate things. And if you talk about just the economy, we're seeing massive depressionary, not necessarily deflation, because that's a currency thing, but depressionary forces where everything's going to crap. Things are getting a lot worse in terms of most metrics of the economy if you really drill down into it. But the currency, on the other hand, is also dying, but the form that the currency takes is for money printing. So the things getting more expensive is enhancing the depressionary forces, causing the economy to slow down. So then that in turn actually causes the money supply to shrink. So after we saw this massive increase in the money supply during and post COVID, where it basically like doubled, with the entire money supply doubled within like a year or two, which is insane. We've actually seen the money supply come back down a little bit since then. But the way this works is kind of like there is no equilibrium point with the currency. It has to either be continually expanding or it starts going into a contractionary collapse, a deflationary collapse. So it's kind of like a rocket where it can either be falling or you blast it off. And it's very hard to like have a rocket float in midair. And what they've been doing pretty much since 1913, with little blips in the 70s and whatnot, it's just having the rocket climb slowly up at a predictable pace, but still launching to the stratosphere, which is why we've seen the cost of everything just continually go up over the years. Nothing has really actually gotten cheaper, with the exception of certain things that we've gotten so much better technologically at producing them that they have actually gotten cheaper in real terms, like some phones and TVs and things like that. But in general, wages and everything, because the currency is slowly dying. And then if it starts to fall, it picks up speed and continues to plummet towards the earth in an uncontrollable way. And the only way to stop that is to blast it off again and like juice the engines. And there's really no way for them to make it just float. And so I do think that right now the rocket is starting to fall again, and it's picking up speed, and it's harder to control because our economy is not stable. It can't absorb a dying currency. Back in the 1930s, the country was a lot more stable. It was a lot tougher in terms of a lot more of the country was based on production. A lot more, jobs were real. Like now, so many jobs are based on either service, based on money that sells, based on derivatives of actual wealth, and not really based on real assets production. So it can't absorb a dying or falling currency in the way even we could back then. And it's not like we did a good job of it back then. Like the country went through some rough times. But now there's just no way for us to absorb it, especially with so many people dependent on just outright payments from the government in various extent, whether that's Section 8, whether that's food stamps, whether that's Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, even stuff like VA benefits that I'm on. Like there are not that many people that are not getting some form of money or benefit from the government. Whether or not they deserve it is irrelevant, because you always hear like the Social Security, the boomers say like, well, I earned this, I put in, I deserve it. It doesn't matter. You can make a deal with the devil and say that he's not holding up his end of the bargain, and you'd be right, but that doesn't mean you're going to get it. And that's what we're facing right now, is that when the money's not there, or when the money's fake, it doesn't matter whether you deserve it or not, you're going to get what you get. And what we're getting now, unfortunately, is a dying currency. So I do think that we'll see that crash until because they don't want inflation. Inflation's in front of everyone's mind. They're seeing the prices go up to an insane extent. Mortgages are 8% right now, all that stuff. But I do think they're kind of letting it fall. They're not cutting rates. They're still raising rates or keeping them stable. And that is putting that pressure on the monetary supply much more so than in the past couple of years. But our economy is not going to be able to take that. And you're already seeing wage inflation pressures, even if they haven't happened yet. Like there is massive pressure to keep wages up because of how expensive everything has gotten. And eventually that's going to cause some sort of what I would call a crash, to where we'll probably see it maybe first in housing, maybe first in the markets. Obviously some international relations thing could mess up the schedule, but I really do think we'll see significant market and real estate decline. And then how long that'll take before they turn on the printing press probably depends on how bad it is. But then all the stuff will launch. So I'm not planning on, like, I don't really have any right now myself, but the people I do know that I've been talking with this about, I'm not planning on thinking it's a good idea to necessarily sell out of the things like commodity stocks, mining stocks, the uranium, the gold and silver miners, that sort of thing. Because I think that the amount of time that it's declined before people realize that's where the real wealth is and jump back in, it's going to be a lot harder to like nail a bottom. You never want to try to nail a bottom, but you might miss the dip completely on some of those, because eventually when this stuff crashes, people are going to pull out. That's what happens. People pull out of everything. Uncertainty is just makes everyone go into cash. But they're going to realize pretty quickly, so everything will go down, but they're going to realize pretty quickly that cash is not a great place to be when that currency is dying. So they're going to want to put it into something else. So they're quickly going to find a spot to put it in. So after a market crash, it may be a matter of days, weeks, maybe months, but eventually that money is going to be like, all right, this cash is not the place to go. It's dying, especially once the government turns on the printing press and we really see the currency start to lose value. They're going to look for places to put it. They're not going to just put it right back into like finance stocks and all these derivatives, because that's what's going to be getting hammered the most. Things that are directly related on the dollar. They're going to put it into, I do think, crypto, just out of, what is something that I can put this in that I know all over the world is to some extent going to be accepted. I can trade it easily. It's not directly related to the dollar. Crypto, I think, obviously gold and silver, but I really don't buy it from the people who say like that gold and silver is like the thing that everyone's going to realize. Like, yeah, they're going to realize that everyone's going to want to get some, but there's a lot of logistically difficult things about buying into gold and silver, especially if we're at the point where people realize they don't want paper silver, paper gold, they want physical. There just isn't enough for even everyone in the country to have like 10 or 20 ounces before it's just like gone. And at that point, they're really going to be like trading with it. So obviously that stuff will go through the roof. It's a fantastic place to be, but I do think there'll be a lot of pressure for that money to go somewhere, that if there's a bottleneck, it's going to blow off somewhere else. So it'll go into crypto, because I think a lot of people, especially my age and younger, have a lot more experience buying and selling crypto than they do buying and selling physical gold. And they're a lot more comfortable with it. And just the knowledge that they're getting the thing that they think they're getting. They know what Bitcoin is. If you're saying a gold bar versus a junk silver versus a sovereign coin versus a numismatics, and like what dealer is good, will it be able to sell it, what's a good premium, like a lot of that confusion is going to force people into other things just when they're in a rush to get out of dollars. Foreign currencies, probably, obviously, like I said, crypto and some of the stocks, but only the ones that are related to physical things like mining companies and things like that. So very interesting times. You and everyone else have been saying that for the last 5 years. When it happens, it happens. Well, yeah, exactly. And I think it is happening. I mean, we know it's happening. It's a question of pace. I mean, look at the price of gold. Gold is at an almost all-time high. It's very close to the all-time high. So I don't see why that's the stuff that I've recommended. Like I talked about, I was looking at someone who I had to sell out, but they were in the uranium and the gold and silver miners and all that stuff. That batch of stuff has gone up 30% over the past 2 years, when the S&P 500 is basically flat. Learn more about the barter system. Yeah, I mean, barter is difficult on a large scale, and it's important to understand the distinction too between putting yourself in a position where you want to take care of your day-to-day needs, and then distinguishing that from wealth preservation and wealth generation. If you're saying, I want to make sure I have enough food to eat, have a place to live, have self-defense, and basic prepping level stuff, it's not a lot different. Obviously the same principles apply, but it's not the same way you would go about saying, I have money that I'm earning from my job now, or I have extra money, or I have investments, and how do I maintain that purchasing power or increase it? So it's a slightly different strategy. Like if you say I have a portfolio of several $100,000, which I don't, but a lot of people do, or I have my basic preps and now I'm making an extra, $100 a week that I want to put somewhere to save it for retirement, for whatever else. You're not going to buy a bunch of stuff planning on bartering that after a collapse. It's a different strategy. It's a different thing that you're trying to do there. You're not going to take I don't think you should take your, $150,000 retirement portfolio that you built up over a few years and buy canned goods with that. That doesn't really make sense. I think you should have a prepping plan, and then you should have your financial plan beyond that. So, oh, hey, Donna, thanks for showing up. Yeah, I'm probably planning on doing one next week as well. So glad everyone could make it. We've been talking a lot about the decline of the economy. I'm sorry if I'm getting a little hoarse. These nerve blocking medications I have to take for this thing I think it's really making me hoarse. So hopefully I'll stop taking those in a few weeks. But let me know what you guys, give me some topics. We went over the economy. What do you guys think is going on for the next, let's say 6 months out? Do you think we make it to that's less than 6 months. So we got October, November, December. Do you think we make it to the end of the year? That's what I'll pose a question to you guys. Do you think we make it to the end of the year with, without a collapse? Or do you think like a market specific? Let's go with market collapse, market or real estate, because those will be intertwined, whichever happens first. But let me know what you think, if we think it'll get till the end of the year without a significant dip in something. Will we make it 3 months, or do you think it'll happen just pre-election? Or do you think that they will somehow conjure up enough fake money? Because obviously, they want to not have a major collapse before the election, because the current administration is already on the ass end of the polls right now because of how bad everything's getting. And if we see a even marked increase in the difficulty that normal people are having, or the cost of living, or a crash in any meaningful sense, then that's just going to make them like, nope, sorry, we're done with you. Let's at least give this other guy a shot. Again, I remember my life was better under him, even if he has mean tweets and whatever. So let me know what you guys think. What's up, David the Good? Hello, everyone. That's the man right there. If you need to learn how to compost and produce food, agricultural resources on pretty much any plot of land you have, especially in the Southeast, he's an expert on that. So go check out David the Good's channel. I remember we met, and I did an interview back in the day when I was ahead of him in subscribers, and he's been putting in the work, making videos constantly, and good videos, mind you, showing me how it's done. Yeah, I don't even know if they care about the elections anymore. Depends on who you mean by they. Because there's some people that care about the outcome. I don't know if they care about the elections per se, or you could look at the flip side and say, oh, they really care, to the point that they might not count as elections anymore. It's David the Good. Hey, creepy Uncle Dave. It's only creepy if you try to steal his yams, then he'll compost his enemies. But yeah, it says market will spiral slowly down. Yeah, well, if that really did have anything to do with it, David, I certainly am. You're welcome for sure, but I don't know if that's it. I think it's the very consistent work that you've been doing ever since then. We will make it to December 2025. Is it? Oh, so you think 2025? So you think we'll make it post-election, before we have anything? I think things will start to get weird within the next 6 or 8 months. But that's just a hunch, and me being completely unable to kind of come up with a explanation for how they won't get weirder. But one thing we haven't seen, and I will say this because I made a comment in one of my videos not a long time ago, like last year or earlier this year, that I thought we would see some significant food shortages by now. In the US, we haven't. I think one of the reasons is that we just see that manifested as high prices. When the US still has money, so if things become twice as expensive, it'll disappear from all the poor places first. If rice here becomes twice as expensive, still pretty cheap, relatively speaking. It might hurt a little bit for people to go out and buy a bag of rice, but when you can buy a 25-pound bag or 20-pound bag of rice for $40 versus $20, that's not really going to stop anyone in the US from buying it. But in India, in Pakistan, maybe that's really going to put the hurting on them. And that's why they've stopped their exports, I think, because otherwise it would just all get sold. And that's one of the things I think that I've talked about this before, that we are at risk of here in the US, because everyone talks about how we can produce a lot of food here and how we do produce a lot of food here. But if our currency dies to where the dollar isn't worth anything anymore, then people are not going to sell it to the farmers who are making a bunch of food, the beef, who are making the corn, making the wheat, making the potatoes, the soy, whatever it is we grow here. Why would they sell it to people in the US when people can use their expensive currencies that are worth twice as much as the dollar now? They're just going to ship it off to whoever can pay the most. And that's a real risk. And yeah, maybe our government will try to do similar controls, but restrictions on shipping. But we don't have nearly as totalitarian of a government. So in general, that's good, because they're trying to be totalitarian, but it does mean that they don't have some of those options as readily available either for like central planning with the economic stuff. So they might not have the same ability to just say, no, you can't sell this to anyone anymore. David has a lot of books out. I don't know about the herbal remedies. Just go on Amazon. He can answer it for you, obviously, if he has an herbal remedies book. We've Anacam, the Hobbit says, I think it's gonna be a slow creep down. Yeah, we're definitely seeing a slow creep, but there's going to be breaks, and then that'll cause them to flip. That's what I want to know, is like, is it just going to get to a point where they decide, we probably need to turn on? I think my view of the situation is that they want an excuse. They need an excuse for pivoting, as it's called. They're not just going to decide to pivot. I think Professor Falcon says, I think real estate, especially land tracts, are the only safe investments. Owning 486 acres of land without any lien against it makes me feel like that is money. 400 acres, that's great. And I don't think it's the only safe investment. I think any real world products are fairly safe. The world, no matter what you do in the government, in the financial system, and with making derivatives, whatever, the world, what we actually need to continue as a human race is physical resources that come out of the earth. That can be food, that can be the earth itself, that can be human capital, it can be metals, it can be minerals, but all of that stuff. I do think land is obviously a great one, because like they say, they don't make it anymore. So there's a fixed amount, but it has its limitations too. It's hard to go invest $100 in agricultural land, realistically. You can get like REITs and funds, but then you have the same problem as shares of anything else. There's counterparty risk. And it's also, you can't, if you decide you need to bug out, you can't take $500,000 worth of land with you. You absolutely can take $500,000 worth of gold with you, if you're lucky enough to have that much, or even $5,000 worth of gold. You can't bribe a border guard with a chunk of real estate, but you can with a chunk of metal. And obviously any of the resources related to self-defense and freedom seeds, as people are called, that's all related to physical resources that come out of the earth as well. I say only because it's about the only physical asset that can't be taken by force. I don't know if I agree with that. Obviously any physical asset can be stolen or taken from you, but yeah, I'm not trying to quibble, because I think it's one of the absolute best things you could own especially agricultural land. So, but obviously there's pros and cons to anything in terms of what can and can't be done with it, what it's good for, whatnot. So I feel like, but agricultural land, especially if you can create income out of it, then it's just the best. Do you think DAPS hard armor is worth wearing in shit? I think hard armor in general, it depends on what the scenario is. If you're just talking about economic collapse and you're out there planting gardens, then it's going to be really worrisome. I don't know how many of you guys have actually worn armor and carried a weapon for 10, 12 hours a day, but I've done it in brief periods of time for military training, and it sucks. And pretty much all you're thinking about is, do I really need to have all this on me right now? So certainly it's worth owning for short-term situations. And we've seen real world situations like this pop up, like what Kyle Rittenhouse had to deal with, riots all over the place. And that sort of, look at what's going on in South Africa, people's farms are getting raided and stuff. And that's certainly possible to happen anywhere in the world right now, especially where there's demographic differences that have conflict with each other. So I definitely think it's worth owning. but there's definitely, it's difficult, regardless of the situation, it's difficult to have it on 24/7. So I think there's different options are worthwhile. If you have the soft body armor, you have just a plate carrier. If you think like we're at a heightened alert, but I don't want to go full battle rattle all the time, then have some different options on lightweight stuff as well. I haven't made videos yet, but some cool options. Bulletproof shield. This one is super lightweight. It's only level 3. Okay, so this is the same as soft body armor, but it's super lightweight. And they have bulletproof shields you can get that are much larger than that. You can get ones that are level 3, level 4. Those start getting expensive. But definitely, I think armor is worth wearing in scenarios where you think you might get shot or shot at. Absolutely. I believe we're going to see a big drop in real estate. I absolutely do. And I had a video prediction, not that my predictions are some super thing, but I think it was, I said within the next 2 years, we're going to see at least a 30% drop. I predict it'll be much more than 30%, but that's one thing to keep in mind too, is that the less specific you are with your predictions, the more likely you are to be right and to be able to benefit from them. So like, let's take the Michael Burry shorts that have been in the news for a long time. He could be 100% right about the size of the crash, that there's going to be a crash, what sectors it's in. But if he's outside of the 3-month window, he's going to lose a lot of money. So he has reasons to think reasons why he thinks it's going to be in the specific time frame. But if you don't have really strong reasons like that, I would try to structure your decisions so that you can benefit from them through a wider range of a particular outcome. So let's say, for example, that like I said, he thinks the market's going to crash within the next 3 or 4 months. I think 6 months probably is around where he made his bets. Placing your bet on that and also placing it in such a way that you get nothing if that doesn't happen, versus just realizing that we're probably going to have a decrease in a lot of these financial assets at some point within the next 2 years. Who do you think is more likely to be correct about that? Obviously, if your target is this big versus this big, you're going to have a better shot of hitting a larger target, especially if you're not as good of a shot. And when it comes to financial predictions, I'm not going to pretend I'm as good of a shot in terms of hitting the target in the bullseye as Michael Burry or some of these other guys. So I absolutely need to make my target bigger, because I'm not going to make any bets that depend on me nailing an exact prediction. But if you had some way to make a little bit of profit or a little bit of benefit from an extremely broad prediction, then that's the way you want to go. And even better is if you can find a way to do what's called an arbitrage, which means that you have a benefit from either side of the position. So if something X happens, or if the alternate happens, you can benefit either way. So if you see like sports betting, for example, someone bets on a team, and then the line changes enough that you can bet on the other team and make a tiny profit guaranteed, no matter who wins and who loses. That's the best way to do it. Yeah, the shield is awesome. Thank you. Right. Generally, I think we're screwed and plan accordingly. Right. If you plan on setting up a systems to where you have a survival garden, a food garden, that's going to benefit you whether the economy or the markets collapse within the next 3 months, next 14 months, the next 6 years. And it's going to benefit even nothing ever happens in the economy. The aliens come down and give us free energy and work the minds of the politicians to fix them. And we have a period of bounty and plentiful everything. You're still never going to suffer from having a food garden or from having extra resources or ammo that you can now just shoot for fun instead of shooting for self-defense. Foreclosures are on the rise. They have increased by over 50% in the last 12 months. Yeah, rents are going up huge. Bankruptcies have increased big time. Yeah. And also, one of the things that I've seen more recently is all these things are happening without a drop in employment. So these things like the increased delinquencies, the increased bankruptcies have all happened at like basically full employment. Everyone isn't even losing their jobs yet. And we're already starting to see these delinquencies and bankruptcies and people putting way more stuff on credit. So the amount of debt is going up and people are still have jobs. So what's it going to look like when they don't have jobs? And another big one that what's the guy's name? Gammon, something, is it Mark Gammon, Mike Gammon? I don't know. He does financial videos. He pointed out why he thinks early October to the end of the year is going to see a big increase in economic troubles is because they are ending the moratorium on student loans. So there was not people didn't get them erased like Biden was trying to do, but they had put a hold on people having to pay any of these federal student loans. So there's millions of people that are already in these positions where they're being delinquent on rent and mortgages. They're having to put stuff on credit. They're having to declare bankruptcy, and they haven't been having to pay those student loans. So then when that turns back on in 2 weeks, to where now they have to pay it whatever it is, and I think the average amount owed is somewhere in the $300 to $500 a month. What do you think that's going to do to a population that is already have a 50% increase in foreclosures and huge increase in personal unsecured debt, all that stuff? What's Scrub Fest? Is that where you guys share shrubberies? What does the OS specialist say? I missed some comments here. Sorry. Sell my silver to buy a house. I like to think of, I'm not a financial advisor, so don't take, obviously don't have very much money right now because I haven't been able to do much work for the past few months because of my back. But I think the best way to look at it is not to look as silver and gold as somewhere that you put your money hoping for a return. I think it's best to look at it as money, like cash, and to look at dollars as somewhere you would put your money when the need arises. So if I have extra money, I'm going to be putting in things that are real. I'm not going to be saving my dollars. That would be like a short-term thing. If I want to hold Federal Reserve, if I want to hold these, yeah, that's singles. If I want to hold these, I have to have a reason. I think the default should be gold and silver because that is actually money in a much more real traditional sense than this. So I don't see it as a reason why you should have gold and silver. I think you should explain to yourself why you have these instead. So if there's something that you need, absolutely use your money. If you need a house and you see one at the price that you're willing to pay, use your money to go buy it. And then if somehow you end up with this, because that's all your boss will give you is, these things, these Federal Reserve notes, then if you don't have something specific that needs these for, I would make sure I trade them for real money. But there's obviously always going to be opportunity costs. Especially when you're talking about physical, there are transaction costs, there's premiums, there's shipping, there's storage considerations. So you don't just want to take every paycheck and immediately go run out and put it all into gold and silver and then switch it back again. That's not what I'm talking about. But I think a switch in the mindset and how you think of what is money and what is the thing that you're investing in should be opposite. This is money, and you're taking a chance by having any of it in Federal Reserve notes because they are, God knows what's going to happen with them. It's a gardening event in North Florida. Awesome. Yeah. North Florida is my stomping grounds for a while. So if you guys are in North Florida, check out Scrub Fest too, I guess. And David the Good says, it really does make sense to eliminate stupid risks. Risks like working for only a single employer. Yeah. Being in huge debt, relying completely on supply chains. Yeah. If that's one thing that we've seen over the past 5 years, is that you're not going to be able to predict where the next little disruption is going to come. And to just have buffer zones in any of those things, your ability to look at what happened with the, who do you think was in a better position? People who had a job that they completely relied on that now said you have to get this thing that you don't want to get, or someone who may make a lot less money, but it isn't coming from one particular source, or they have food, they have a paid off house. So if they need to, Prepper Princess did a fantastic video recently about if things really get gnarly, we're talking about worse than Great Depression, but starting from there, let's say Great Depression is best case scenario. If things get there or worse, what do I really need to survive? And she has structured her life fantastically to the point where she determined that she could get by probably with no external income other than what she makes from selling power back to the grid with her solar. But it worked out to about $200 a month or something like that. So if you can do that, if you can not get yourself entangled with these obligations, whether it's a job, whether it's a debt, anything, if you can say, you don't have to get rid of all that stuff now, but if you structure your life so that worst case scenario, you can just sit at home alone in the dark if need be with your food, with, and just not be beholden to these external forces, then that's a great position to be in. Hey, thank you, SBQR Cincinnati. I really appreciate the super chat. It says, wishing you a great and complete recovery from your upcoming surgery. Thank you. I'm optimistic. I've got some weird internet drugs to take that should hopefully speed up my healing. I was been researching peptides, and there's some that are supposed to definitely speed up the healing of like soft tissue damage and stuff, and anything that actually happened from the surgery. And I'm in a good cohort to have a quick recovery. I'm not an 85-year-old in poor health or whatever. So if you're a non-drinker, yeah, anything like that, health, obviously, speaking of health, I'm so glad that this is happening now and hopefully should be resolved before any shit the fan scenario. But if you have anything that you can work on, obviously with health, if there's something wrong that is unfixable, which is just the way the universe works, unfortunately, then there's no way to deal with that other than to find out the best ways you can to mitigate that and stock, whether that's medication through Jace and getting a few months of that, whether that's finding out what diet gives you the fewest symptoms, finding out what things you can do that require less physical movements, shacking up with people who, have the skills that you do. If you can provide something else, that's great. Appreciate it, David. Thank you very much. Definitely feeling all the love lately. So, and honestly, to be, God, I was gonna say, I was saying, to be honest, I have been feeling actually pretty good over the past few days. I had it was kept getting worse to a point where, like I said, I had some bouts where I got taken to some new realms of human experience in terms of pain. But they upped the dose of like the nerve blocking medication I've been taking, and it seems to have made a very good difference. And I've switched to eating is basically pure keto, minus a few cheats here and there, because that seems to help with inflammation and whatnot. But so now I'm just kind of not really doing anything. I got 10 days left till the surgery, and obviously I'm gonna have to recover from that. But at the very least, it should be something my body can actually heal from. Stock it to the rafters. Golden money is to buy stuff. Yeah. Why not get it now when it's cheap to buy? Yeah. And that's, like I said, like I went back to what I was saying earlier, don't confuse the preparation with financial, portfolio. Those are two separate things. And you shouldn't say that just because food is better than money in a disaster that you don't want to have any wealth stored in anything but food and bullets or whatever, because it just doesn't make sense. Those are two different things. But at the same time, you don't want to say, well, I can't use my food and, it doesn't help me pay for retirement, so I don't want to have food, because that's what you need literally to survive in all these disruptions. So just look at those as two separate things. Get your basic prep squared away. Try to become as resilient as possible when you don't rely on a job or the infrastructure is, try to rely on those things as little as possible. And it's impossible to be completely free of it. Even someone who has a completely, like the Amish, you want to go full Amish, they are not completely independent of modern society. They still have to go into town and trade the things that they do have for the things that they don't. Of course, they can go a lot longer without interacting with people than most of us, and they are completely independent of some elements of the grid, but don't think that you can just get to a point where you are invincible from this. It's better to just limit it and realize where your connections are and bolster those weak points than it is to try and think that you're free of it. Because we've seen the Amish get raided by the feds too. That even if they were completely independent of, you may not believe in the government, but they believe in you, and they like their rules. So yeah, I appreciate that, Anga Cam. I'm just waiting at this point. I've got about 10 days left. As of right now, I have zero debt. Buying a house would change that. Yeah, I don't think that. I mean, obviously, right now it's hard to say whether buying a house is good or bad because it depends on your position. I do think having secured debt, if you can afford the payments, and if you have offsetting assets that may go up in an inflationary environment, makes a lot of sense, because we've heard tale how in these inflationary spirals of currency death, that a 100-ounce silver bar, you could buy an entire house with it. So even if you bought a house right now at 8% interest, if you paid it off in 5 years with one silver bar, you're going to feel like a genius. But is that what's going to happen? I don't know. But you do need a house to live in, so is it a better alternative to pay super high rents that are going out there right now and to wait 6 months to see if the housing market crashes? And if it does, are the interest rates going to stay at 8%, or are they going to go up to 12%? Or are you not even going to be able to get a loan? So my kind of view of the situation is, if you need a house and you can afford the payment and you have an ability to put some of that money, you just make the down payment and put the rest of the money into assets that could go up when the currency starts dying, it might still make sense. If you have the ability to just outright buy a house in cash, then maybe it makes sense. And the rent right now isn't kicking your ass. Then it may make sense to wait and see if you can dive in, because I wouldn't count on being able to get a loan. That's, I think, is the cutoff, is regardless of what the interest rates are, I wouldn't count on being able to get a loan when we see this crash. Everything, the system might just seize up. People aren't going to be able to, there's not going to be a good price discovery for what the loan should be priced at interest rate wise when the currency is dying that quickly. People are going to want to sell their houses, but they're not going to be a lot of people able to buy them outright. So if you have no ability to, if you are 100% required, or like think you're definitely going to need to get a loan, it might make more sense to buy something now, even at these high interest rates, because I don't think that that's where it's going to end. But I'm not a financial advisor. Correct, but one must be careful, must understand. Yeah, as always, you have to define what victory looks like. That's the biggest thing I see people make up. If there is one video that I could make, I'm going to make a new version of it because I think I can do it even better. But I definitely think my most important thing, I've had 14 years of content. I don't know if I'm probably over 1,000 videos by now. I've gotten rid of a lot of the old ones off my channel, especially when YouTube algorithms started cracking down. I had to delete a lot, but I definitely think I've made over 1,000 videos. Definitely hundreds and hundreds of videos over 14 years. And I think the most important one I ever made, not that many people watched, and it was called, it's out there as a podcast that I made too. It was called 12 Rules for Dealing with Bureaucracy. And it's not just strictly speaking with bureaucracy, but it's super important. I recommend everyone watch that. I'll make a new version of that soon. But the number one, or I don't even know if it was the number one rule, because they're not necessarily in an order of importance. They're all important. But one of the major rules was you have to be able to define what victory is, because that's going to guide all your decisions. When you decide, like, I've got a fight coming up of any kind or any kind of challenge, you have to be able to say, this is my goal, or you're not going to know when to make decisions. And so you have to define what winning looks like, and then it'll help you make decisions. And also you can kind of use the inverse of that and saying, like, what would really keep me up at night? Like, look, I don't like focusing on the negative emotions of things, but that's usually an easier way for people to define it when it comes to like these financial decisions. Like, would you be more distraught by missing out on a huge opportunity, or would you be more distraught by taking a risk and it not working and saying, like, man, I should have just done the safe bet? Because people are different. Some people are going to be much more burned up inside by being like, you know what? I was weak. I didn't have that dog in me. I didn't take the shot. And now I lost out on these huge gains. That might burn them up, some people up a hell of a lot more than the opposite. And some people are completely different to where they're going to say, I can't believe I took that risk and it didn't pan out. I feel so stupid. And they'll dwell on that for the rest of their life. So realize, know yourself, know your enemy, know yourself. And that should guide, and then define what victory is. And like I was just saying, on the flip side, define what a most heinous defeat would feel like to you, and you can work to just avoid that. If it's hard to define what winning would look like, at least figure out what would really burn you up the most. Missing out on an opportunity, or losing and supposedly wasting a sure thing, because it's going to be different for different people. Been watching since the beginning, bro. Yeah, appreciate it, man. I have a lot of guys that I know are 6, 8, 10 years subscribers, and I really do appreciate it. It makes me feel like I can't imagine that my stuff is worth it to watch for 10 years, but it definitely makes me feel some kind of way. Don't let them put needles in your arm. Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to have a couple needles in my arm for some general anesthesia here coming up, but make it something, structure your life so that you have the choice. That's the important thing about this. I think if investment demand was going to cause PMs to spike, it would have happened by now. Yeah, it depends. I mean, so much of this depends on the Joe Schmo realizing what's going on. And if your thesis is that, hey, average Joe hasn't realized this yet, that means that's not the case, I would question that. I'm not saying you're wrong, but that would be my assessment. Look at everything else, the way everything goes. And if you're relying on your next door neighbor and your grandma or whoever else to realize the truth, for it to like verify it in your own mind, I don't think that's probably the best metric. RX drugs do lose efficacy over time, but not that rapidly. Yeah, especially stuff like antibiotics. We found that most of these drugs can last years, some decades, and at most maybe they'll be like half as powerful or something. But I appreciate that one about good comments about my videos. I had a different YouTube name back then, though. Previously, was Stacking ML. Awesome. Cool, man. Nice. Yeah. And then YouTube has cracked down on a lot of firearms. It's weird to me how some channels are able to escape it and others just get the total, railroading. It's probably just comes down to one or two employees that don't like your face, don't like one comment you made, or who the FBI pressured, because we know that. We have absolute proof in federal court cases that the government has singled out accounts by name to these tech companies and said, why are these people's videos still being shared? So there's some of us might be on these lists, like by name. Yeah, it says PQR says before you go under, ask for the Mars Total Recall package. Hell yeah. I'm choosing voluptuous out of the options. I'll take the Sharon Stone wife though. I've always joked around how like if the feds ever send after me, that's totally gonna work. Or if you get a young Sharon Stone to be like, why don't you stay and tie me up instead? Yeah, they're gonna get me. Sorry. Feds, if you're listening. Honeypot it, you probably get me. You get an agent that looks like a young Selma Hayek or young Sharon Stone or something. Yep. That's it. Done for. Forgotten weapons remain strong. Dude, that reminds me. All of you guys should love this. There was literally a guy who defended his home with a spear. He got a home invader with a spear and fucked the guy up. And I was like, yes. I actually have a spear, a cold steel Asagi spear, I think it is. Awesome. Fearsome weapon. And honestly, they've done some, I think it's probably a stretch to call them studies, but they've done experiments where people who are completely untrained against other people who are fairly well trained with a sword, a spear is way more formidable in the hands of someone who's untrained. You have to be very good with a sword to beat someone with a spear, even if they're not trained. So especially just because of the reach, the ability, you have to have both hands on it. It doesn't take as much strength and speed and alacrity and everything to wield it. Dude, those alien bodies in Mexico are so funny. Do you remember the fake Bigfoot body from years ago that was literally just a rubber suit and a block of ice? That's the level that I hope, not because, like I said, I have no ego invested in this. I just want the most crazy, hilarious thing to be the truth. And I hope that those are the ones that turn out to be real. They're so damn fake. Those crusty alien bodies in Mexico that I just think it would be the funniest thing ever if those are the ones that turn out to be real, of all things. These crusty things made out of like easy foam and stucco. Yeah, spear no shield beats sword no shield. Yeah, if you have because your ability to just do quick thrusts are just really, it takes a lot of skill to parry that, and it doesn't take a lot of skill to do it or a lot of strength, where it can take a lot of strength and coordination to effectively use a sword. So if you have, unless you're like a medieval weapons connoisseur and train with it, get yourself a spear. Just the reach alone is a huge benefit. But yeah, those crusty aliens. Hear the drums echoing tonight. Yep. I was and still am shadow banned from many social media platforms, mainly because I spoke out on Facebook. Yeah. Yeah. And I openly tell the ATF that I hope that they well, I won't say any of it here, but yeah, I openly mock the ATF and whatnot. So I'm sure I'm on some lists. Cold steel spears are awesome. And like I said, they're fearsome. You could really mess somebody up. But those alien bodies are hilarious. If you guys haven't seen that, look those up. They literally look like they were made out of stucco and foam, just like pressed out of foam. And they've gotten some kind of audience within the Mexican Congress. From what I understand it, the UFO researcher who found them, has like already been busted for fake stuff in the past. So it's like, why is anyone paying attention to this? Who's going to be expecting a spear? Yeah, exactly. A road rage and you pull out a 6-foot spear. It's like, that guy's out of there. There are no aliens. I'm in the know. Yeah, yeah. What's a while? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Although either one being completely true would be weird to me. If there's like absolutely nothing else in the universe, that would be weird. And if there's aliens everywhere, that would also, of course, be weird. So there's no way we can escape weirdness. Either one seems unlikely. Yeah, it's paper. It does look like paper mache. They're so fake looking. It's hilarious. But the good news is if they are real, they're skinny little bitches and we could definitely take them. Things are like 2 feet tall and snap them in half. Not worried about them. They can have a laser. Yeah, no aliens. Does make for some interesting headlines though. Yeah, that would be hilarious R-rated if they made like an NC-17 rated version of Home Alone where all of these traps actually happen the way they would. Like if your hand gets stuck on a hot thing, the skin all peels off, or if you get a paint can swung in your face and teeth are all knocked out and mandible cracked. These guys just getting absolutely mangled. Like how it would really be. A guy catches fire and it's supposed to be funny. Like these guys would have been absolutely brutalized if any of those things, like a metal conduit pipe swinging into your nose, bridging your nose. You would just be done. Yeah, we scared him off, and it doesn't sound like we scared him off. If this guy's right, we murdered him in the Bronze Age, and have their crusty little bodies in Peru. I was joking around with somebody, said maybe they look like that because the Peruvians just deep fried them. That's why they're all crispy looking. These aliens came down 2,000 years ago to give us the secrets of free energy, and we end up raping them and eating them, deep frying them, and doing God knows what. Family Guy did a realistic Home Alone sketch. Kevin was instantly murdered. Yeah, that's actually what happens. A kid would just get murdered, but if someone did it, actually get hit with any of those, like electrocuted from like, it wouldn't be too comical. But yeah, obviously an 8-year-old kid or 10-year-old or however old he was at the time, and things would just be like, oh look, marbles, and then they grab the kid and stab him. Would not work out too well, but it did make for a funny movie. The family with the 10 feet. Yeah. I mean, that was right over by. I'm not over me. I'm not in that part of town, but here in Vegas with the ones who the body cam saw the meteorite, and then the family claiming they had tall beings in their backyard. That was here in Vegas. So that was a weird situation. The video was ass. It didn't show anything. And that's also weird. Like you have some people saying aliens are 10 feet tall. Some people saying they're 2 feet tall. It's all whatever. Over it until I see something. It's like literally that meme where the guy's like, the Coomer guy's like smoking and he's all like depressed looking, and the alien shows up and is like, aren't you surprised? And he's like, man, I got a lot going on right now. That's literally the way that everyone is now. It's like yawn. It's like, all right, I mean, show me something cool, I guess. It doesn't even matter if this crusty alien body's real, or what difference does it make if it's real or fake at this point. At this point, what difference does it make, as Hillary Clinton would say? Or what difference at this point does it make? I'm in Vegas, and the cyber attacks have been interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. The crime in Vegas is interesting because it's very compartmentalized. It got really bad right after the shutdowns for COVID. The first group of people that came back to started going out on the strip and vacationing in Vegas was really ghetto. And before we got back up to full capacity tourism, that's like the only people that were here. So there were a lot of like shootings, and it was all gang related. It wasn't too much just like random violence, but there's been a couple crazy incidents of just random brutality. Like recently there was these kids that in North Vegas that stole a car and did like a joyride where they ran over and murdered this guy on a bicycle. It's on video, who was actually an ex-police chief. Just they smashed another car and ran over this guy just for fun. I mean, that's obviously a one in a however many. It doesn't happen often, but it happened. And there's this, but outside of certain parts of town, it's not bad. If you look at the stats, it's not good, but it's all relegated to certain areas. A lot of like shoplifting and stuff like that. Not as bad as like San Fran and everything, but it's not too bad when it comes to just random acts of violence, but it's a possibility more so than in a small town, obviously. Yeah, if the little alien bleeds, we can kill it for sure. Obviously, we could kill it. They're dead. They got bodies, right? Something killed it. But Vegas isn't in a spot where you really have to worry if you're just going from your, normal, not in the strip, not in the bad part of town at this point yet. But I assume that there'll be a point where all major cities get significantly worse. So at that point, I'll have to make a decision if it's time to go to the sheep farm in the woods, which I don't have yet, or stick it out and put up a fight. Yeah, Vegas is not bad at all overall. If you don't go to the strip or go east of the strip or out in the northeast corner by like Nellis, you'll never have any issues as of right now. Yeah, it's definitely getting worse. Like I said, overall, just because people are getting poor and stuff. Yeah, northeast Vegas. If you just go straight up on the northwest side, it's just nothing but brand new housing developments. There's not even any stores, it's all fairly fine. But anything west of the strip is usually fine. But Northeast Vegas is the worst. For some reason, all military bases are always in the shitty parts of town. I don't know if that's causal or not, but yeah, I obviously haven't had any issues. You'll hear like random stories of different things that happen, but it's not rampant yet. So that's the good news. So what else we got, guys? You got some more topics? It's been about an hour. I didn't have any chance to get any memes together for you guys, but I'll try for next time. There's some funny ones out there, especially like these alien bodies. But did we get a consensus on whether we think there's going to be market decline before the end of the year, or if you think it'll be after? Let me know, because I'm curious. And that's pretty much all I got. So if you guys have any last minute topics, let me know. And I appreciate all the guys who contributed for sure. Definitely. Like I said, no memes. I'm sorry. Definitely makes a difference. Like I said, luckily my medical costs for this have been very low, comparatively speaking. It's just the fact that I haven't been able to do much. And all I do for income is me doing things. So that slowed me down. So it definitely helps. I appreciate it. Yeah, they're not my memes. I'm a meme thief, but I do appreciate it. I'm good at curating. I'm a meme curator, if you will. Meme curator. Yes, I'm curious to see if anything happens with October 4th emergency message thing. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, anytime we hear about a date like that ahead of time, it's never anything. I definitely think these are all signals that they think something could happen, but I do think it's just going to be a test. But the fact that they feel like they need this system operational to where everyone on their cell phones can get these emergency messages and take over, like, it would be stupid of them to do something at the time because no one's going to buy it. They're like, oh, we know it's a test. So I think it's just going to be a test. But I think, like I said, that these are all indicative of where we're at, of them worrying about these things. Just like that nuclear warning, that crappy, poorly made nuclear PSA in New York City a while back. I don't think that was like a predictive program or anything. I just think that they're worried about it. And so they rush these things out. And who knows, we might have had a close brush. We heard, decades later about all the things that happened during the Cold War where people's fingers were hovering over the button. So who knows, something like that might have happened. But I don't normally buy all all of this is planned to the last, and this is a sign for this, and it's a dry run and all that. I've been operated at too many different institutions and organizations and too many levels of this, and sitting in rooms with generals, you get the same stupid shit and stupid thought processes and idiocy as you do sit in a room with privates. It's just different, takes different forms. So I just don't buy that humanity works differently in the dark rooms where it's all senators and presidents than it does in a school board meeting where there's true believers. You know what I mean? I think you see the same bullshit. Yeah. The ICBM alert sent out by Hawaii by mistake a few years back. Oh yeah, I mean, that could just be some specialist in the in the top secret room who's got a little clearance, fat finger something, and instead of doing a test, they do an actual send it out because they didn't check some box or something, and that had people like literally thinking they were going to die, throwing their kids down manholes and stuff because they got an actual alert that ICBM was going out. And who knows? Maybe that was based on, like, they meant to send it because they thought the mistake could have been not to send it out. They may have sent it out on purpose based on false information. Who knows? Who knows? And the more and more of the stuff that is automatic, like it's set up to be automatic based on, it doesn't take a human necessarily to go boop. It's going to be based on inputs from other electronic systems. There's chances for this stuff to just happen. Yeah, it definitely said this is not a test, right? Like, it sent out the report. Like, I don't even know what I would do, bro. I would just be like, it would be hilarious probably. Because if you see that on your phone, you're throwing your phone down, you're in go mode. Like, when do you even look at your phone again? No one's doing this is not a test. Intercontinental ballistic missiles are headed for your state. And you're just like, let's give this a minute to see if maybe it's a mistake. No, like, you are on at that point. That's what I think exactly, is that they were going to do a test to see if the system was operational. It was supposed to work the same way it would work, but just have air gapped it so it didn't actually send it out. And they messed up that part of it, and it just sent out the actual, because at some point you have to really do things. A test doesn't always just involve doing a lesser version of it. You have to really kind of do things at combat speed sometimes. Yeah, the world was literally end, and there's nothing anyone could do about it. Yeah, exactly. Wild, wild though. That would have caused me an interesting day if that happened here. That's for sure. Because I was even thinking about, like, in that Libyan port explosion. Like, I see that thing. How can those people not have thought that there was just nuclear bombs going off and been right down into like DEFCON 1? I think it would be good for purpose of a 5-minute evacuation plan. What would it? Yeah, I think that's a very good one. You have 5-10 minutes maybe. If you can't get out the door with some semblance of preparation in at least 15 minutes, I think you got some work to do. Now, I don't think I would be happy with the level of prep I would have at 15 minutes, because a lot of stuff's not organized well, but I could do it. And I have totes, and I've been working on that specific problem. There was a news report about dad throwing. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Like, they opened up a manhole and he just threw his kids down in there, which actually is not a terrible idea. If you don't have a shelter and you're just out there, I mean, it's possible you could get trapped and stuff in there, but it's better than standing out on the side of the road. Because any sort of shielding you could have like that, it would probably be a pretty good shielding. But in Hawaii, I would be worried about it getting flooded. But actually, I mean, the good thing about Hawaii is most of it's pretty far above sea level. It's volcanic island, so you're not just like, it's not like Florida. At least Hawaiians have a good supply of spam for sure. But that, yeah, can you imagine that, man? That was so wild. And that, I got to thinking about trying to have a setup to where you can tell. Yeah, obviously, you have a loaded trailer waiting. That's one way to do it. There's a lot of things, depending on your environment and for security reasons, but specifically for weather reasons, that you don't just want to leave in an unair conditioned. Like, you can't have you don't want to necessarily have a lot of food and ammo in a trailer that's sitting out in the heat and the humidity and stuff all day. What I think is a better plan is to have totes ready to go, numbered 1, 2, 3. And then you say in bug out bag, of course, your basic loadout and bug out bag should be number 1, because vehicles might not be an option for whatever reason. Maybe who knows what the situation is, but your vehicles might not be an option. So you should have the first step is what you throw on your back, ready to go. And then after that should be what I'm going to throw in my vehicle. And I think totes, and number them. So that way you determine what the disaster is and how much time you have. Beep, I've got 30 minutes. Okay, start loading stuff up with 1, 2, 3. Oh, we're 30 minutes, time to go. If you think you have 5 minutes, maybe you only get to number 3, then you go. But then you already have them determined ahead of time which one are the most important and which one you need to get. And I think another thing that people overlook is not only structuring that to work in the end of world scenarios, where you're going to be like living off the grid in the middle of the woods, just out of your pack. Most of these things, if you've looked at everything that's happened over the past 50 years, none of the situations where people have had to leave their homes have been end of the world stuff. It's been extremely serious, extremely local, and extremely time sensitive. So the time element has actually been more important in all the real world examples than the severity of it, like widespread. Like, if you get a state away, almost all these problems have been resolved by just distance, but you have to leave like right away. So if we're looking at just real world examples, it's much more important to be able to leave quickly with the important stuff than it is to be able to survive with just what you have with you for more than a couple of weeks, because that's rarely the case, but it's possible. So you still want to have that be an option, but it's much more likely that you're going to have to leave really quick, like these wildfires in Hawaii, like the toxic derailments in Ohio and these other states where there's noxious chemicals that are going to suffocate you and they could explode. You need to get out of here basically now. And all sorts of other stuff like that. Don't forget 12 pounds of silver. Actually, yeah, silver, obviously small amount of silver you want, maybe the coins, but if you need to take as much wealth with you as possible, if you look at $20,000, let's say, that's a lot of money. It's a nice chunk of money. You're not carrying $20,000 of silver. That's 1,000-pound Comex bar is roughly $22,000 to $25,000. 70 pounds, and it's about this big. You're not taking that with you in your bug out bag. So if you have more than a few $100s that you want to take with you, you're going to need gold. Now, I do think having silver is better in terms of how likely it is to increase, how easy it is to get small amounts of it in trade and stuff. But if you're talking about taking as much monetary value with you as possible, you have to go with gold, because it's just, silver is just not that monetarily dense. So even carrying a 10-ounce bar is still only a few $100s, and that's a decent chunk. So you're not taking $10,000 worth of silver with you, most likely. You can throw it in your truck, but yeah, full tank of fuel. I try to keep it like half tank. If you can do 3/4, if you don't drive a lot, and the gas can's full, ready to throw in there. Because even an extra 10, modern vehicles gotten pretty decent with fuel economy. An extra 10 gallons of fuel, that's another state or two away that you can get for most people. And that's one more gas station that you can avoid where there's people fighting over it while you just keep going. When authorities tell you to stay in place, listening may be the wrong decision. Yeah, I mean, it depends. There's been a meme, not even a meme, but there's been an article that came out where they were like, only those who disobeyed survived when it came to the fires. And there was another example that people posted from 9/11 where one of the guys who worked in, I think it was the second tower to get hit, he saved over 2,000 people's lives because they said, no, just stay put. And he was like, no, we're getting the fuck out of here. And he actually didn't make it because he went back in to try and make sure there was no one else. But he saved over 2,000 people's lives because he said, fuck you to the government. We're getting the fuck out of here. We're not listening to you. And I'm getting these people out of here. Imagine that, 2,000 more people. It would have been twice as bad if it wasn't for one single guy who decided to tell the government, fuck you, and we're doing what I think is the right thing to do. But you live with that decision. If it had been the opposite, people would have been looking at him as excoriated him and say that he cost all these lives. But there's definitely the trend seems to be in favor of ignoring the government. Not necessarily, you don't want to get into a position where you reflexively do the opposite, because that's pathological. It's just as bad as being a dumb sheeple who does everything they say. It's just to do everything opposite of what they say is just as pathological. It's just as reactive. You want to just ignore what they say and rely on your own assessment of the situation and then make a informed decision. Because like I said, just automatically doing the opposite of everything they say, you're still basically basing all your decisions on the government, just in a contrarian way, which is not the best thing to do. But definitely recent and intermediate history has suggested that listening to the government is not the best solution. But I'm not going to tell you to do anything illegal. Not on here. But hey, thanks guys for watching. Once again, appreciate everyone who's contributed. I'm planning on doing this next week. And hopefully Dan said he'll be free. Shay hopefully as well. And then I'll probably be off for about 2 weeks, just recovering from the surgery. But, after the first week or so, I might be antsy and bored, and I should be up and about at least. So hopefully at that point, I'll be able to do it.